Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce, bringing timely economic discussion to the region for nearly 40 years. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Pretty Flaherty. Community Corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Tomorrow's leaders and entrepreneurs sponsors, AAA Northern New England and ProSearch. Coffee sponsor, Skowhegan Savings. Parking sponsor, Vitalis Real Estate Group. Media partners, radio sponsor, WGAN. Print sponsor, The Forecaster. TV sponsor, WMTW Maine CW. Business news sponsor, Maine Biz. With production support provided by Headlight. Venue partner, Holiday Inn by the Bay. And thank you to our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, MEMIC, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, Southern Maine Community College, and the University of Southern Maine. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President, Britt Vitalis.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the September 14th, 2022 Eggs and Issues, the monthly business breakfast event series brought to you by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. This is our first Eggs and Issues event of the 2022-23 season, and we are very happy to announce that we are exclusively back in person at the Holiday Inn by the Bay. My name's Britt Vitalis. I'm the owner of Vitalis Real Estate Group, a real estate brokerage in Portland, and I'm honored to serve as a volunteer president for the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you all for being here, once again for joining us for Eggs and Issues. It is so great to see everyone, I don't think I've seen any masks. This is a great group. This is our first totally live in-person event. I think not hybrid, not virtual or anything else. So we want to make sure that we are providing an event that experiences the needs for all our attendees. Thank you. We've got a lot of municipal leaders here today, city councilors and mayors and managers. So thank you for being here. And today's presentation will be a panel discussion on the 13 ballot questions that appear on November 8th when you head to the polls in Portland. But before I invite our panelists to the stage, I want to take a moment to recognize each of our sponsors of Eggs and Issues who make this event possible. First and foremost, our presenting sponsor, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. I also want to thank our other generous sponsors, our cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, our reception sponsor, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and the newest member of the team, Pretty Flaherty, our most recent addition to the Eggs and Issues sponsors lineup. Our Community Corner sponsor is Goral Palmer. Today's Community Corner is Picture Maine, a local advocacy group that is working to support Maine's economy through film. By working with legislators, they are proposing a bill that would incentivize filmmakers to bring their projects to our state while providing jobs to our workforce and dollars to our economy. In the coming decade, the state will need to adapt to 21st century advancement in technology, invest in a rapidly growing gig economy, and play to its strengths in the thematic areas of making, manufacturing, food, and technical services. To learn more about Picture Maine, visit their website, picturemainefilm.com, and while there, purchase tickets to their upcoming inaugural gala premiere party to sponsor the initiative. Tomorrow's leaders and entrepreneurs sponsors, AAA Northern New England and ProSearch. Through this program, the Chamber is able to offer students in the region, both high school and college level, an invitation to attend Eggs and Issues at no cost. I believe we have students from Falmouth and Gorham High Schools today, as well as USM. If so, could you please stand and be recognized? I love this. Thank you all for being here. And if you saw any of these young folks who stood up, please go up and say hi after so they feel welcome and comfortable and sort of networked into our community. Our coffee sponsor, Skowhegan Savings. Our parking sponsor, you might have noticed me out there parking cars, Vitalis Real Estate Group. A special thank you to our media partners, The Forecaster, WGAN, MTW, Maine CW, and Maine Biz. And our For More Information sponsor is the Portland Public Library. Production support is provided by Headlight Audiovisual, and our venue, the Holiday Inn by the Bay. It's great to be able to meet here in person today and throughout this whole season, fingers crossed. Very special thank you, finally, to our special community partners who support all of our chamber initiatives. Anthem, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, University of Southern Maine Community College, and MEMIC. Let's have another round of applause for all of our generous sponsors. So now on today's presentation, I'd like to start by inviting our 6 panelists up onto the stage. I will then introduce them and kick us off. Yep. Come on up. All right, our professor is getting mic'd up as he's approaching the stage here. I will start with the other introductions. Let's see, we've got Jonathan Culley here is a co-founder and managing partner at Redfern Properties. You can spot the tower crane in their 18-story building that is building 260 apartments right downtown. We have Joshua Chasen, co-founder of Restaurant Workers of America and works daily in Portland's famed restaurant industry. Jim Cohen is a former mayor of Portland and served on the Charter Commission from 2009 to 2010. He's a partner at Verrill Law and has decades of experience as a mediator and regulatory lawyer and sort of our expert on Portland law. Alex Parisi, here closest to me in front. Alex Parisi is a small business owner. Her company, Curate Maine, manages short-term rentals and apartments in Portland. Mary Allen Lindeman is co-founded Coffee by Design 1994, thank you. The number I'm reading does not make sense. With one coffee shop in the Arts District, and today operates multiple stores and wholesale distribution. And finally, last but not least, is Professor Ronald Schmidt is a chair and professor of political science at USM. Professor Schmidt received his PhD from the University of California at Berkeley. I want to just set the table a little bit, and then we're going to engage each of our panelists here to talk about a whole variety of different issues around all these questions on the ballot. Now, 5 years ago, there were 2 voter referendums on the ballot in Portland. One was rent control, the other involved zoning, and allowed just a few neighbors to shut down entire development projects in this era where we need housing so badly. Fortunately, both failed to pass. 3 years later, in 2020, there were 4 referenda on the ballot, 3 passed, 2 ended up in court. This November, there will be 13 questions on the ballot for voters to decide by referendum in Portland. They will walk into a ballot booth and see 100 pages of legal language on a myriad of different issues. And on each, they will be asked to vote yes or no, up or down. Portland residents are asked to vote on cruise ships, short-term rentals, 2 questions on that, rent control, question for the 3rd time in 5 years, new labor laws, including but not limited to minimum wage, and finally, 8 questions on the fundamental structure of government in Portland through the Charter Commission. Will voters be expert enough on every issue? Will they understand all the implications of what they're voting on? What if they agree to some of the language but not all? What are the impacts and unintended consequences, and who's pushing all this? This is the subject of our presentation today. I want to start with an overview of the referendum process. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how it's been going and look back at something that passed 2 years ago, and then get into some of the specifics about what's on the ballot today and its impact for our community. So let's start today hearing from Professor Schmidt on the history of the citizens' referendum. Professor.
Thank you so much, Britt, and thanks everybody for being here. I've been in Portland, Maine, in this area since 1999. I've never done one of these before, but this is, I'm honored to be able to participate in a forum like this. I'm originally from California, and when it comes to talking about governance by initiative, I sometimes feel like the character from the Terminator, talking about the future that we might find ourselves suddenly facing. The initiative process in California did not come out of nowhere. At the turn of the 20th century, the Southern Pacific Railroad owned an enormous amount of land controlled an enormous amount of jobs, and had huge outsized influence in the California state legislature. Essentially, legislation that the SP wanted to see passed was rubber stamped, and legislation to which it was opposed always failed, often before it even got out of committee. So initiatives were devised there as a way to get around that sort of plutocratic blockage of the democratic process. It was a safety valve, an emergency device, rather than an attempt to replace representative government with a more direct form in general. And at times it proves crucially important. Even now we face circumstances when you can see the need for that kind of a process. And as gerrymandering becomes more and more of a problem in state legislatures, I don't think that situation is going to change anytime soon. But the initiative process brings with it unintended consequences. Unintended consequences being one of the great laws of political science. To think of just two sort of famous examples. Back in the mid-1970s, when I was in the public school system as a kid, there was a property tax crisis going on in California. Property taxes were skyrocketing, and elderly people were finding themselves basically being taxed out of their homes. The California state legislature was doing very little to deal with it, and the governor at the time, Jerry Brown, did not respond in any sort of constructive way to the crisis. So a citizens' initiative was put forward, Proposition 13, which capped property taxes and dealt with that crisis. But it also cut off a major flow of resources to the California public school system. I went to elementary school in a building that had been built in the 1930s in a kind of Art Deco 1930s style. We didn't have outstanding resources, but we had the resources we needed, and we had amazing libraries. Students in the California public school system now go to school in trailers, and there are 3 big high schools in Los Angeles that are forced to share one library. Nobody set out to do that in the 1970s, but that's where we wound up. In the 1990s, right around the time I was leaving California, a citizens' initiative was passed, Proposition 187, that was intended to deal with the problem of undocumented immigration. And the way that they dealt with it was essentially to deputize healthcare workers, first responders, teachers, and others to report people they suspected might not be in the country legally, which essentially came down to a policing of people with Latino accents. As a result, there were families that weren't sending their kids to school. There were people who weren't going to the hospital or the emergency room. There was a flood of other potential crises that arose, and of course, a long and very expensive series of legal battles. The result was not that Latinos fled the political system or that they fled the state, but they did flee in droves from the California Republican Party. Particularly first-generation Latino immigrants in California tended to be pretty conservative on social issues and to form within coalitions either as independents or with Republicans. But they saw Proposition 187 as essentially an attack on their communities. They were the most likely to have accents, for example, or to quote-unquote seem foreign. And the result was that the GOP lost any access to the Latino vote for a generation. They didn't set out to do that. They didn't want to wind up in a situation where they couldn't win statewide races. But that is, in essence, where they found themselves. In addition, over time, groups like the SP have found ways to work the initiative process to their benefit. You try to put something on the ballot to, say, ease the regulation of, let's see, what would be a good, domination of local zoning decisions, say. Companies with deep enough pockets can flood the ballot with 5 or 6 initiatives that look like yours, but that are toothless. That might result in some of those being passed and your initiative not making it, but more than likely it results in total voter fatigue. Voters deciding that they don't want to support any of the initiatives and getting disenchanted with the system as a whole. It's not that these are proof that the initiative idea in and of itself is inherently problematic, but it does point to the fact that Initiatives are a rather blunt tool that were designed to deal with blockages in the normally working system of the democratic process. Wealth is already an overrepresented good in most communities. In some circumstances, it can be so overrepresented as to result in essentially a plutocracy. And that is a genuine problem. But it's not a problem that speaks to a need to dismantle the workings of representative government entirely. I referenced gerrymandering earlier. Representative politics is having a hard time right now. The disincentives to working together across party lines are getting more extreme, and gerrymandering means that we're seeing more and more completely red and completely blue districts, which means that voters don't really provide incentives to their representatives to work with members of parties on the other side. That is a problem that needs to be resolved, not to lead to the replacement of our, I agree, incredibly complicated and slow system of deliberative democracy with what is essentially meant to serve as an emergency measure. Thank you.
Professor, thank you. Didn't know you were going to get an education today, did you? We're going to come back to you. We've got more for sure, but that sort of set the table and gives us some context, which is really helpful. And Jim, we've got more for you on the charter in just a little bit, but I want you to start out because you understand the workings of Portland government so well. Tell us just a little bit briefly about Portland's referendum process and why it's sort of maybe more vulnerable to being used as much as it is.
Sure. So in the city of Portland, we do have a citizen initiative process. Britt laid out some of the ones that we've faced. I think if we could have had 14 chairs up here, you might have had one for each of the ballot questions that we are facing. But in order to get a question on the Portland ballot, you need to go out and collect 1,500 valid signatures, which is not a heavy lift. You then draft up an ordinance, and that is not done publicly. So some group, some individual could go out and draft a question, go out and collect signatures, and it will be on the ballot. Once it's on the ballot, the city has no control over the question. So when we vote on state issues, we know it goes to the Secretary of State, and they carefully craft a question that is basically one sentence, and we vote on that. In Portland, we don't have that level of control as a city. Then, if the voters end up passing something, it almost functions like a constitutional amendment for 5 years because the city council can do nothing about it. So if there's any error, which there will be, in the drafting of that ballot question, we are stuck with it for 5 years. We can't build homeless shelters because of a Green New Deal, which had a lot of bad language in it. And if voters of Portland aren't convinced that 100% of what's in one of those questions is what they want and accurate, we are stuck with it for 5 years.
Thank you. Jonathan, let's look back to 2020. The DSA backed initiatives just a couple of years ago, and the impact of the Green New Deal, which Jim just mentioned, was really the big one and maybe the most sort of deceptive, particularly in its title, and rent control. As far as I'm aware, the DSA are not housing experts, but not so surprisingly, the housing policy initiatives that they pushed have had significant negative consequences. Can you talk first just a little bit about the DSA and what this group is, and then second, how the policies have been, the past 2 years ago? What do we know about them?
Yeah, thanks, Britt. The DSA is definitely not housing experts, and I would take it one step further. There is a science of housing. There's an economic science. Social sciences are different from the physical sciences, but we call them sciences for a reason. And I would say not only are they not experts, they're sort of science deniers. And it's really troubling that we see groups on both ends of the political spectrum. On the right, you see COVID denial and climate change denial, which is tragic. Well, on the left, we see the DSA, who's completely uninterested in economics. And there's a vast, overwhelming majority of economists who say, rent control is ineffective public policy. And so not only are they not experts, they're in the category of science deniers. I will say, as the housing person on the panel, that we should all acknowledge that the shortage of affordable housing is tragic and unacceptable, and we can't all sit up here and talk to the Chamber of Commerce without acknowledging some of the problems. So I think it's important to do that. You and I both have battle scars from 2017 when we first beat back the rent control ordinance, and then 2020 when we were less successful. And so what are the sort of the outcomes of those policies? I would say on rent control, it's not fully ripe yet. I think the implications to rent control are long-term. We talked about the Green New Deal, and the Green New Deal has been nothing short of a disaster, and I think there's empirical evidence to support that. Jim mentioned the homeless shelter that couldn't be built because of the Green New Deal. For us, for our business, it means we're now not looking in Portland, we're looking outside of Portland, and I know most of our colleagues in the development community are in the same boat, and we're starting to see data. There are thousands of, there's thousands of units in the housing pipeline in Westbrook and now in South Portland, and there's almost zero in Portland. I heard, and this is sort of anecdotal, that for the first time in decades, Maine State Housing's low-income housing tax credit pre-application, there were 0 projects in Portland, and this was the first time in decades. And so I think the Green New Deal has been a disaster. That's the example of the type of policy that these folks are putting forth, not considered in a public process, not fully baked, not subject to legal review, and this is what we get.
Yeah. Back in that campaign a couple of years ago, it was striking that the affordable housing providers, the builders of affordable housing, came out against it, saying this is not good for housing. And it's not green. I mean, we're talking about it like it's a housing bill. It is a housing bill, but it was called the Green New Deal, which I think goes back to Jim's point, that we couldn't change that title. We were just stuck with the Green New Deal, is that correct? Okay. People look around the city of Portland right now, you've got a rather tall building going up. Can you speak to that? Because I think it's a little confusing. We're saying, look, there's no new housing, and you look around and there's a lot of housing going up.
I mean, all of the stuff that's being built right now was planned and mostly permitted prior to the 2020 ordinances. There's one project we're doing on Forest Ave where we are meeting the 25% workforce housing requirement. And we'd love to do that. We love building workforce housing. We love building affordable housing, but the economics are the economics, and you've got investors and lenders and all these other stakeholders who are looking at this objectively, and if the numbers don't pencil, they don't pencil. So, the way we create housing in our country, for better or for worse, is 90% of the housing is built by private developers. And so I would say that if the DSA wants to change that, and there's a valid debate on whether we should be building a lot more public housing, but that's got to happen at the federal level. And when we try to make these changes to the ordinance at a municipal level, it's just going to backfire. And as you and I have discussed, the legacy of the Green New Deal is going to be to move development from urban walkable environments to car-centric suburban locations, increasing our collective carbon footprint. Go figure, right?
To that point, I was called just 6 months ago by a developer wanted to come to the area and build 150 to 300 units. He said, well, of course I'm not going to build in Portland. You can't build in Portland. So he's looking Freeport North. So now we got more sprawl. That seems ironic as a unintended consequence of something called the Green New Deal. Back to the unintended consequences. Thanks, Jonathan. We're going to come back, I'm sure. Jim, the Charter Commission, there's so much here without going too deep and getting too wonky, which is really hard. Tell us a little bit, what is the Charter? I mean, is this important? I think it got opened up by referendum, and there's been a whole commission.
Yeah, so I appreciate, first of all, seeing all of you here today live and remembering how to put on a suit to appear live, and great to see you all. I too am a student of government. That's what I studied as an undergrad at Princeton, and then over the last almost 31 years as an attorney here in Portland and Maine, working with state agencies and quasi-municipal water districts and sanitary districts, and then serving 6 years on the city council here in Portland, one as mayor. And then had an even more of a crash course in the formation of government and how governments work, spending a year on the Charter Commission. I served as vice chair. I think Pam Plum is here, who served as chair of that Charter Commission. We came out with some modest changes to the city government. The city charter is our constitution. It's designed to be difficult to change, and it is enduring once changed. So the process to get something onto a ballot, we have 8 questions related to our city charter. And to get on the ballot through a charter commission, first the city has to vote to have an election in order to have a charter commission. So that happened. The voters then said yes at that election. Then a year later, or half a year later, there was an election to put people onto the charter commission. Then those people had to serve for a year and agree. There were 12 of them. And in this case, there was agreement on 7 questions, and then I think another one was added by the city. So that gets 8 questions. And then in order for those to be in the charter, the voters then have to say yes this November. So imagine that any one of those questions passes. In order to change it in the future, you have to back up to ground zero and go through all of those steps all over again. So whatever ends up in our charter, we have to be extraordinarily careful because we will be living with it for decades.
So there's a couple questions I think you have particular concern about that you wanted to highlight. Questions 2 has to do with city governance. Question 5, which addresses the process by which the school budget is adopted. You want to speak to these?
Yeah, so those are the 2 most significant questions, question 2 and question 5. Frankly, most of the other questions are ones that we could live with or without. There's codifying in a charter, Police Citizens Review Committee, codifying the Peaks Island Council. Those are things that already exist. If nothing passed, we would be fine. But questions 2 and 5 in particular, we would be not fine if those were to pass. Question 2 is governance. So let me start by saying so our current council has 9 members. 4 of them have an at-large perspective, a citywide perspective. 5 of them are district councilors with a neighborhood perspective. I've always felt it's kind of like a House and a Senate rolled into one deliberative body, able to make decisions with those different perspectives. What this charter commission does is expands the number of councilors. So we're going to add 3 more politicians who will be district councilors. I was a district councilor. I had a neighborhood focus. There were 4 others with that neighborhood focus. So we're talking about affordable housing. When things want to get built, neighbors come out and they're concerned. You have NIMBY influences. As a district councilor, I had very strong NIMBY influences on me. We're now taking that balanced council and saying 75% of that will be neighborhood interests and only 3 will be citywide interests. I'm greatly concerned about the ability to get the housing people want and need with that kind of council. Then there's 12 members on the council. So the council can deadlock. I've never seen a deliberative body that didn't have an uneven number of members. So that's the council changes. Even more concerning is the mayor position itself. Now, in our last charter commission, we changed from a system where we had an appointed mayor. I was one of those appointed mayors appointed by other members of the city council. I served for 1 term. We accomplished a lot, and other mayors accomplished a lot. I felt at the time it was important for voters to have a chance to weigh in. We have that right now. We have Mayor Snyder here, who's done a great job for the city, understanding what that role is. It's a policy role. It is, in fact, the predominant form of municipal government in this country to have a directly elected policy mayor. And that was the role that we chose for the city, because we also wanted to have professional management. When you don't have professional management, then you are left with people who are not skilled in the basic functions of municipal government. Municipal government is about paving roads. It's about making sure the sidewalks are okay, making sure we're safe, we have police protection and fire protection, that we're sensibly planning. We want professionals in those positions. Do we want elected police chiefs? Perhaps not. Do we want those police chiefs to keep changing with each administration? Do we want planning directors to keep changing with each administration? Well, what this charter commission has done is said now, instead of the mayor having a policy role, the mayor is going to be the manager responsible for implementing the policies, responsible for the hiring of those division chiefs. So imagine issues like, where should police patrol? Where should we pave our roads? Those are professional decisions made right now objectively. Imagine now that an elected mayor is in control of those things. Will police protection be allocated in a way that reflects professional opinions of where crime is happening? Will roads be paved based upon the age of the road and condition? Or will those decisions be made based on electoral politics? Our charter commission 12 years ago said, we don't want those decisions to be made politically. This charter commission, and if you read their report, what they point to is critics. They don't name who those critics are. I don't think the people of Portland were clamoring to give more power to one person. But it doesn't end there, because this mayor will have the authority to veto anything that happens to get passed by the council. This mayor will have the ability to issue executive orders, whatever those are. That is a tremendous amount of power for one person. My in-laws were from Chicago. They couldn't believe that Portland was a city without corruption. Portland is a city without corruption, but that can change. And we should be very, very careful before we try to make any changes. We're not a perfect city, but in my 50+ years, we have steadily improved, and I would hate to see us backslide. That's the first question. Question 2 that we're concerned about. Question 5, school budget. Biggest part of our taxes comes from the schools. In my time on the city council, I served as chair of our city finance committee. The school budget was a mess. You may remember at one point the superintendent had to resign over a budget problem. The state of Maine decided to pass LD1 in 2004. I participated in drafting that question. And it was all about having careful spending increases. And it specifically gave city and town governments the ability to weigh in on school budgets. The people who understand the taxes, people who are elected to send out the tax bills. This question would say we're going to take that away through a little bit of a sleight of hand by saying we can just designate the school board as the voter, as the budget entity. I happen to think that is not legal. A municipality is a city or town, and the budget authority of a municipality has to do with the city budget. And so the Charter Commission's attorney did not agree that this was legal. So in order for this question to go forward, the attorney for the school board issued an opinion which was not even a clean opinion. It said, we might be right on balance, we could be wrong. And if this goes forward, I happen to think it's wrong. We could get sued, and any taxes that we issue based on it could be reversed, which would put our schools into chaos. So, very concerned about what's on the Charter Commission now.
Really interesting. Thank you, Jim. Joshua, let's get into some of the other questions. So one of the ballot questions is being pitched as an increase in wage. But cleverly hidden in the question is the elimination of the tip credit. I believe you're probably, I only saw it on my phone, probably on the front page of the paper today, and quoted throughout, talking about this issue, so thank you for being here with us. Can you explain why it's important that restaurant workers, why this issue is important to restaurant workers, and what might happen if this ballot passes?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. And thanks to the Chamber for inviting me here today, and thank you to all the legislators who came this morning. Thank you for coming and hearing us out. My name is Joshua Chasen. I am a local server and the president of the Restaurant Workers of America. Restaurant Workers of America is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation of the tip credit, the tip wage system, and tipped income. It started in 2017 when the state of Maine passed a $12 an hour minimum wage ballot question back in 2016. In 2017, we came together as a ragtag group of servers across the state, the Restaurant Workers of Maine, and got our state legislature to reinstate the tip credit in the tip wage system. For a little primer for everyone who doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about, the tip credit is the difference between the prevailing minimum wage and the lower tiered wage paid to tipped workers. That specific law always guarantees that when our tips and our base wage are added together, that we always receive the highest prevailing minimum wage, wherever the state, wherever the city, whatever the case may be. So we're always guaranteed the highest prevailing minimum wage no matter what, and that's already embedded in our law. State law provides a 50% tip credit, so the business can take a tip credit of 50% against the prevailing minimum. So as the prevailing minimum goes up, again, we will continue to go up as well with that minimum wage. What the DSA did this year with their minimum wage question was they increased the minimum wage to $18 an hour, and then they allegedly put sub-minimum wage into the ballot question and referred to this specific subset of wage as a sub-minimum wage. Don't believe the hype. That's not at all what this is called. That's not at all what this is. The sub-minimum wage is something that's been phased out over, of course, a number of years. It was once part of state law. It no longer is. It is no longer part of city ordinance. So the tip credit and the tip wage system allows us as workers to economically thrive in an incredible city. So we've built up an incredible dining scene here in the city of Portland. And the tip credit and the tip wage system allows me to maximize my income. It allows me to remain the commission-based salespeople that the commission-based salespeople that we all consider ourselves to be in the industry. If that tip credit goes away, we in the industry already understand the unintended consequences. We understand increased automation, counter service charges, which is important to note that service charges are not property of the workers, they are property of the business, and the business can give out however many of those dollars to whatever they feel as though the worker deserves. Again, taking money out of we as workers' pockets. Another small, unintended consequence, or a big one, and no matter how you look at it, is the idea that if the restaurant is forced to give more money to those of us in the business who already make the most money, there's no, confusion there that servers and bartenders make more than the folks that work in the back of the house or the heart of the house. If funds are diverted to give us who already make the most money more money from the business, how long does a prep cook, a line cook, a dishwasher have to wait to see their annual raise? Will they ever even see one? And so it's all of these insane unintended consequences that we in the industry understand. We know that, Census Bureau and BLS data shows that as our base wage goes up, tips go down. That's just reality. And so we are fighting this minimum wage ballot question specifically because of the tip credit and its elimination. There's a lot, in my opinion, disastrous parts of this proposal. To Jim's point, this is crafted language in a back room somewhere where folks who don't work in our industry, don't understand what they're doing, are just allowed to draft whatever they want, and then we're on a 5-year lockout. Another insane part to me as to this ballot measure specifically is that it eliminates independent contractors from companies like DoorDash, Lyft, Uber, to dine in, et cetera. So essentially what that would do is create a no-fly zone in the city of Portland for all of these companies. So it essentially would force Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all these folks, these employers, to eliminate them as independent contractors, shift them over to an employee role, and pay them an $18 an hour minimum wage. My husband DoorDashes for a multitude of reasons, but one specifically is the freedom and flexibility of his hours, and two, he crushes it financially. So the idea that you're now going to eliminate that freedom and flexibility of being an independent contractor and being able to clock in and clock out when you want to, but more importantly, the folks of Portland don't understand that you're not going to be able to get a lift from the airport. You're not going to be able to get a lift home from the bar at the end of the night. And your Instacart deliveries will cease. There's so much rolled into this minimum wage ballot question, and the summary is so brief, and voters are just not going to understand the totality of what this does. And so me and my organization and what we do is attempting to educate all licensee holders here in the city of Portland, and then attempting to understand or educate voters so that they understand the dynamics of the situation, and that this isn't a broken system in need of fixing, and we as workers oppose this legislation.
Thank you, Joshua. It's really scary, and there's the unintended consequences just as stark as they could be, that the folks that maybe this is purporting to help are coming up and saying, please don't help us, we don't need your help, stop. I assume they didn't reach out to you and consult you when they were drafting this language?
Shockingly enough.
Okay. Well, thank you. Alex, you're a Portland resident. You manage short-term rentals for other folks. You also who work with short-term rentals, and you live in the city. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your situation, and sort of how you're making a living here, and how the elimination of short-term rentals, and which are two sort of competing questions, which is confusing, how it would impact you?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alex Parisi. I run a company called Curate Maine, where I manage all types of rentals, but I specialize in short-term rentals. I started this because I was trying to stay in my apartment on Munjoy Hill, where I've raised my son, and it's grown, and I've stayed, which has, been quite a gift. I manage around 20 units from 12 or so clients, and in Portland, I find my guests to really want to visit like a local, and it's something that I'm really happy that I can share, with those people that visit our amazing city.
So to work for you, you employ cleaners and,
I do,
and
yes.
other folks, and the folks you're seeing come here. I mean, it always struck me that maybe they can't afford some of Portland's hotels, but there's sort of this other slice that is still supporting our economy.
Sure. I mean, I send people all over the city to, our wonderful restaurants, our coffee shops. They stay when they visit to see a show at Thompson's Point. They aren't taking away from the hotels as much as they are kind of like a symbiotic thing, right? Like there's different types of guests, there's different types of people with different budgets who are looking for different experiences, and we can offer that.
So this is the second time in 2 years that your job's on the line by vote. Hadn't the council already created a system and a setup for short-term rentals in the city? Aren't they already limited?
Yes. So it's interesting when I speak to people in the community about this referendum. They're surprised to find that there is a cap already on non-owner occupied units, so 400, and that's it. There are fees associated, and my clients pay their fees. They register every year. They're responsible. They have their properties inspected. And people are surprised by that, to know that we've already done this. We've done this before, and we're doing it again. And it's exhausting for me because I've worked really hard to start this business, grow this business, to stay where we live, and with already there are guidelines in place. There's already rules in place, and every 2 years having to come up against it again, it just feels. It feels like it's been, I think, echoing what a lot of people have said, that these referendums are written by people that don't understand or aren't getting the perspective of people that are in the business, or people that are property owners, or people that are even tenants, or servers, or whatever. I think creating rules should be a discussion, and not just kind of like, here's the solution, without consulting people that actually may have something to say about it. So yes.
Yeah, well, thank you. And one of the other things that might have come up in a discussion, and did come up in the discussion when the council already created a system for short-term rentals in the city, they're limited at 400, they have to be registered, is the islands.
Yes.
And at Peaks Island, there are cottages out there that have been doing short-term rentals for generations, long before there were Airbnbs. They would be eliminated. And I believe I saw an interview, I don't want to misquote anyone, someone from the DSA, they said, oh, well, like kind of implying maybe they had forgotten about that. We'll fix that later. Right. Well, they actually won't fix that later because it's going to be locked in for 5 years. So instead, these folks who have been renting their cottages on the islands for years won't be able to any longer if this passes.
Yeah, and I think the fear, is in that case, maybe these families that have rented for generations to, visitors and then enjoyed their island homes may have to sell, and then where are they going to? Maybe someone who's out of state who won't be around for most of the year, and it just changes the community. I also think it's important to note that, if my Airbnbs are no longer able to function as short-term rentals, like, they will not be thrown into this affordable housing pool. I can guarantee that. There has been far too much invested so far. They will be furnished monthly rentals, absolutely. So I just think that the focus on this is short-sighted. Like others have said, there's a lot here. There's a balance that's super important to maintain. And I believe that the cap on 400 is good. Like, we don't need more. Like, I think it's important to regulate and to keep that balance. But having to continuously, it's frustrating.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
Mary Allen, thank you for being patient, and thank you for all you do for our community on a daily basis and have been doing for so many years. Your business is sort of an institution that we all love and respect here. So,
does that mean I'm the oldest on the panel? I think that's what that means.
You've got some thoughts.
I age well. No, coffee. But no, it's really a privilege to be here, and I just have to ask everybody here in this room, who isn't tired? Is anyone here not tired? And I am a really optimistic person, but I have to be honest with you. I'm exhausted. And I've been in business for 28 years. I dream to make 30, and I'm nervous. I am really scared if we're going to make it to 30. We have been through the AIDS epidemic. We have been through 9/11. I don't know how many recessions. We started in a recession when there was a 40% vacancy rate in downtown Portland, and the city came together and we created a vibrant community working together. The pandemic, obviously, we're not through it yet, but we are still here, and I am proud. It's taken a lot of hard work of the community and the people who work with me. But I am scared of something that I never thought I would be, and that's something inside, and that's the referendums.
And how does this impact your business? You were talking the other day when we were speaking about planning. Like, you need to plan. You need to prepare for the holidays, staffing.
Forget the 5-year plan, the 3-year plan, the 1-year plan. I can't plan. Every day, my highest paid employee right now, I wish I could tell you it is the amazing coffee taster I have. He's paid well. I had to hire a CFO last year. There isn't a single day. I have my numbers today. Every morning I start with numbers. Every day I start with, here's the wish list. How can I grow? No, I can't risk doing that yet. I have a general manager position I've just placed on hold. I have a renovation of a building that really needs to be restored. Yes, I know India Street's counters look crappy. Don't tell me, I know it. I can't afford to do it right now. I have an amazing team of people. I have both retail and manufacturing. My retail team are tipped. They actually do get the minimum wage right now. We don't do the typical, but so with tips, and I can tell you this because I look every day to see how much did they make in tips? When other workers wouldn't come back during the pandemic, my 15-year-old came to work and she had to pay taxes last year. They're making good money, and I look constantly to make sure, are they making enough? I have a manufacturing team. It is the most profitable part of my business. Do they make the same as servers? They're the back of the house. They don't. They're paid well, but if suddenly the minimum wage goes up to 18, and that's my starting wage, and that's what my tipped workers get, the game changes really significantly. So every day, instead of spending time talking to you about, wow, we just sent our coffees out and they got 90+ scores, which in our industry is unheard of, or that I sent someone and went with him actually to Italy to represent the United States in the Cup Tasters Championship, I can't spend time talking about that because I need to make sure I'm going to be in business. I can't look at next year because I need to see, based on this election, did I make a really bad choice that I just bought product to have on my shelves and I better be able to pay the bills? That's what I do every day. I don't get to talk about the dream of coffee. I don't get to talk about the farmers we're working with. I don't get to talk about how proud I am of a team of people, because I don't know, and I'm emotional about it. I don't know will they have a job next year. I spent almost $2 million on payroll last year. $2 million. I spent $3 million on cost of goods. Coffee is expensive. It should be if it's good quality. Coffee, just literally, I'm looking at, in the past 2 years, the raw materials to make coffee has increased almost 100%. Shipping to get coffee from overseas has gone up 10 times what it was. Labor costs, we all know what's happened with labor costs already. At a certain point, I have to really look at, when do I just stop looking at numbers and say, I'm done? I went from 75 people to 25 overnight when the pandemic hit. I'm almost back to 50. I'm holding until I see what's happening in November.
Wow. Sobering. Thank you. Thank you again for all you do for our community. And let's keep spreading the word. I mean, you had mentioned this needs to be in front of Propel. These issues, these points need to be in front of our young people, because these ideas are important. There are challenges right now, inflation and taxes and all these things, housing, these are real issues. At this event, we talk about these issues. This is not an us versus them. We are all engaged, but the process and the way it's going about in the city is not right, and it's not working, and this is what we've been talking about today. In the remaining time we've left, we'll do just a quick couple rounds. Professor Schmidt, I don't know that you're an expert on the cruise ship industry, but maybe with what you know about our process here, this one seems a little weird, that cruise ships were on the ballot at all from the DSA. Seemed strange to me. I don't know what their thing is about cruise ships. But now, although it's on the ballot, if I've got this right, they're asking people to vote against it. So they sort of negotiated a deal as though they're a party at the table, but they actually started a train they can't stop. Is that right? Can you just explain this a little more?
That's my understanding, yes. And I mean, good for them for being able to be flexible once more information comes to the fore.
This is great. We're very happy.
Because we're still at a point at which changes can be made. But as you pointed out, within a few months, we're going to be in a situation where changes can't be made for 5 years. And our system of governance is cumbersome, in part because we're trying to bring so many interests together to figure out some sort of a path forward to effectively make the difficult decisions of the city. And I like going on cruises, but I can't really speak to the practical nature of how they're managed within a community like ours. But having it done by a fairly untransparent and unrepresentative system strikes me as an unlikely place to work. As I was saying before, that citizen initiatives as a fail-safe has been an important part of our history, but it cannot replace the deliberative work of representative bodies.
Yeah, thanks. Jim, anything else you'd like to add on any of this? Or
Yeah, thank you.
I've got some more specific questions, but I know you must have something else to share.
Yeah, and one of the things I was thinking about, this is obviously a business breakfast, and frequently I would hear the comment of, why can't government behave more like a business? And maybe sometimes we want that, maybe not every time. But one of the things about our system that does work is we have a deliberative city council representing the people of this city. They hire the manager to implement their laws. That's how corporations are set up. The board hires their president to implement what the policies are. Now imagine a system where no longer does the board have any say over who's going to implement their system. So the council makes policy, and then there's somebody else with a different set of interests being asked to carry that out. That is one more formula for gridlock. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, which I didn't mention earlier, 15 current and former mayors, all but Ethan Strimling, said this is a bad idea. And these are people that did not always agree, but we all agree on this.
So there are a number of campaigns forming. I think, Joshua, you're involved with a campaign. There are like pockets of campaigns. There's one overarching campaign. Joshua, do you want to talk a little bit about yours and anything you know about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yesterday actually, we got some really great press out of it. So you may have seen us in the paper this morning or on the news last night. So we came together with a number of vested interests. So owners, workers alike formed a ballot question committee, the Restaurant Industry United. We are specifically opposing question D because of the elimination of the tip credit specifically. There's a huge variance of opinions as far as whether even collectively amongst us on whether 18 is the right wage for the city of Portland. Could the city handle 18? Could it not? There's a lot of variance of opinions. Quite frankly, I'm a very huge Democrat, and I certainly think, in my opinion, that the city of Portland could handle 18, though this may not be a popular opinion in this room. But nonetheless, the bigger and more overarching point is that this referendum is not the way. It is not the way to get it done. If you support higher wages for workers and you support $18 an hour, absolutely, I'll stand right next to you and fight that fight. However, not this way. And not with the ability to draft proposals that you have no knowledge of the unintended consequences that come along with it. We brought up a good point about question E and the cruise ships. It's like, they crafted this question. The Longshoremen's Union were like, what the hell are you doing? You're going to put us all out of work. What are you doing? So then the DSA got flexible and said, no, don't support question E, but we got all the others right. And so it's astounding to me that it even passes the straight face test with voters. And I really, really hope that voters and folks in this room can continue to educate others as to what this means for our city. And again, the idea that the city can't touch it for 5 years. So were the tip credit to be eliminated, it would be in full elimination by 2025, and then the industry is already undone. We've worked really hard to create an incredible dining scene here in Portland, and question D would really upend and just destroy it in a lot of ways. So find us at restaurantindustryunited.com and then on, of course, all the socials. And please support us and please share with friends, especially those in the industry, as to what the heck we're doing and why it's important.
Thanks, Joshua.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you're involved with a campaign, you and I, and a bunch of others in this room with a campaign called Enough is Enough, which is just saying, say no to everything, because this is, and part of what we wanted the takeaway to be here is, you are not going to leave as experts of all 13 questions. That's impossible. I think probably no one is, because the process is flawed. Can you tell us just a little bit about this campaign?
Sure. So Enough is Enough was, I think Nick Mavadonis is the sort of the treasure head or the front person, but it's Mary Ellen said we're tired, and I think everyone's tired, and we've been through these campaigns before, and we're frustrated, and we've started to see the negative results, and so we're putting a campaign together, and of course we're trying to raise money and get the messaging out and buy media and things like that so that people know, and I think. Our opponents will say that this is a sort of narrow coalition of muddied interests protecting their their business interests, but I think it's much broader than that this time. We've seen people from all swaths coming up and saying this is just ridiculous and we can't continue to govern this way and we've got to stop it. And what I've said to people is, if you think this is bad, if the DSA wins this time, what do you think they're coming up with next, right? We got 2020, and the dust hasn't even settled from these 2020 referenda, and they're coming back for more. And so I think that if Portland voters support this slate of referenda, what we're getting in 2024 is anybody's guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. I think this is our time. I want to thank our guests. This is a diverse group. We probably would have fit more people on stage if we could have fit them, because this does impact all of us. So thank you all very much. This is important stuff, so please get out there, spread the word, let everyone know what's going on. This really is the future of our city. If you have additional questions about today's topics or how you can get involved in the November election, please reach out to Quincy Hensel and Eamon Dundon at the Portland Regional Chamber. To stay apprised of future updates, we encourage everyone to sign up for Chamber's advocacy and events newsletter by scanning the QR codes found on the signs at each of your tables. As we conclude today's program, you can view a complete list of all the Chamber's upcoming events at the Chamber's website. We invite all of you to attend our next Chamber event this Tuesday, September 20th, Grow Basics for Business. Does your business have an energy strategy? We look forward to seeing you throughout the fall as we continue our monthly Eggs and Issues events in the 2022-23 season. We will be here in person at the Holiday Inn by the Bay, where we'll guarantee another full slate of eggs, topics, and speakers. Please come out, encourage your friends and colleagues to come out. Post-COVID, I think we weren't really sure, let's say post-COVID, we weren't really sure that people remembered how to get up in the morning and put on like hard pants, as I've heard them referred to, but this is a great group. This is the best attendance. We've got to keep this going. This is part of our community, networking, seeing each other once a month and talking about the important issues. So thank you all for coming. Have a great day.